There's a specific type of deal loss that never shows up in your CRM. The buyer finds you, they read your website pages, they check a competitor, and then they go with the competitor. It's not because the competitor's product was better, but because the competitor's messaging made them feel understood and yours described just 3 features. You didn't lose the deal because you never entered it. I see this constantly with founders who have genuinely differentiated products. Customers who've been with them for years. The pipeline is inconsistent. Deals take longer than they should, and the sales team keeps saying the same thing. Prospects go quiet after the first call. The founder's instinct is to fix the follow-up or hire a more senior rep, but that's the wrong diagnosis. The problem was set before anyone picked up the phone. The reason this happens isn't random. There's a specific mechanical failure underneath it, and once you see it, you recognize it in your own messaging immediately. And that's what I want to unpack in this video. I'm Frank Husman, and I built and sold my own B2B SaaS company, and for the last several years, I've worked with over 40 founders on go-to-market. And the pattern that I just described, I see it more times than I can count. Different founders, different products, and still the same problem. And almost always the founder is diagnosing it wrong. Most founders believe that the positioning is about describing your product as clearly and compelling as possible. You list the key features, you explain the use case, you make a strong claim about what the product does. And if the product is genuinely good, the argument goes, the right buyers will recognize it. That belief sounds reasonable. It's also why so many good products struggle to grow past a certain point. Because positioning isn't a product description, it's a claim about the buyer's world. And those are fundamentally different things. And confusing them is the root cause of most messaging failures I see in B2B SaaS. Because buyers don't wake up thinking about your features, they wake up thinking about the problem they're trying to escape. The pipeline that's stalling, the sales cycles dragging on, the marketing spend going up while results stay flat. If your messaging describes your product before it describes that experience, before the buyer feels recognized, you've already lost the first battle. They land on your website and think, okay, another platform. Not, this is for me. Winter ran research on B2B messaging across dozens of SaaS categories, and the finding is most buyers couldn't tell competing products apart. Not because the products were the same, but because the messaging was. Same language, same feature first claims, same structure. When products that do different things describe themselves identically, buyers default to the familiar, the cheapest, or the one with the loudest sales team. And the window where this plays out is longer than most founders assume. Dream Data tracks actual B2B buying journeys. Their 2026 benchmark, 81% of the research praise happens before sales is involved. It's 9 months of your buyer reading your posts, checking competitors, forming a shortlist, before even a conversation happens. And that entire phase is your positioning doing its job, or not doing it. It's not a traffic problem, it's an explanation problem. I see founders building products from the inside out. You start with a problem, usually one you experienced or found through customer discovery. You build a solution, layer features, refine the product over months or years. And by the time you're writing your positioning, you know the product so deeply that you describe it from the inside. What it does, how it works, what makes it technically sound. Buyers experience problems from the outside in. They don't start with your product, they start with the situation they're stuck in. A quarterly review or pipeline is flat, a rep who's re-explaining the basics on every call. The gap between inside out and outside in is where deals die quietly. I work with a founder whose product genuinely solved a specific painful problem for his ICP. Objectively differentiated, not a commodity. But when I looked at his messaging, the headline described 3 features and the sub-headline described the 4th. There was not a single sentence on the homepage describing what it felt like to have the problem he was solving. His sales reps were spending the first 50 minutes of every demo establishing why the problem mattered. Not building excitement, not qualifying, just explaining to prospects why they should care. It's not a sales execution problem. That's positioning, doing 0 of the work it's supposed to do. So we rebuilt the messaging around the problem frame. The headline described the moment of friction the buyer was experiencing. The first 2 sentences weren't about features, they were about what the buyer was probably feeling when they landed there. And the underlying message, you're in the right place, we understand what you're dealing with. His reps reported a different experience almost immediately. Prospects arrived already convinced the problem was real and worth solving. Those first 15 minutes shifted from education to qualification. The reps weren't selling harder, they were starting further along in the buyer's process. And this pattern shows up at every layer of go-to-market. Your website headline, your LinkedIn post, your outbound sequences, your sales deck, all of it is either starting from the buyer's experience or starting from your product's capabilities. Most founders are doing the latter, even when they think they're doing the former. And here's a test I use. Read your headline out loud and then ask, is this describing something the buyers feel or something the product does? The most complete platform for X describes your product. But stop losing deals because prospects don't understand what you do describes the buyer situation. One is a feature claim and the other is a mirror. And when buyers see themselves in your messaging, something clicks before the conversation even starts. And the second pattern connected to this is what I'd call generic differentiation. Founders know they should stand apart from competitors, so they pick 2 or 3 dimensions: faster implementation, more integrations, better support. Then every competitor in the space picks roughly the same dimensions. The result is a market where everyone claims the same advantages, and the buyer has no basis to choose. So you're not actually differentiating, you're adding yourself to a list that already exists and sounds identical. Real differentiation comes from owning a problem frame that nobody else in your space is using. Because if you're the only company describing the problem the way your buyer actually experiences it, not the category level description, but the specific felt version of the problem, you've created something a feature list can't replicate. Because buyers feel understood. And feeling understood is not a feature, it's the beginning of trust. And it forms before anyone picks up the phone. So the cost of feature-first positioning is usually invisible until you know what to look for. When your messaging doesn't resonate before the sales conversation, your reps start every call in explanation mode. They're educating and not closing. Sales cycles lengthen, and the drop-off between first and second calls goes up because prospects who aren't immediately sure why they're there tend to go quiet. You look at this and assume you need a better process, more volume, or more senior people. But the actual problem is that messaging is forcing sales to do a job it was never meant to do. Every extra meeting required to move a prospect from curious to convinced is customer acquisition costs. And that number keeps climbing without conversion climbing with it. While that's happening, competitors with sharper positioning are building trust in the background. Buyers who weren't sure about your product but felt understood by a competitor's messaging are already leaning the other way before a sales call happens. And you don't see that shift, and by the time you do, it's decided. Then there's pipeline you never see at all. The buyers who found you, read your website, couldn't figure out if it was relevant for them, and moved on. They don't show up in your CRM, they don't become a lost deal, they're just absent. That quiet cost is often larger than the cost of deals you're actively tracking. So when positioning is right, the buyer arrives pre-convinced. They've already connected your solution to their problem because your messaging did that work during those 9 months of background research. Sales becomes confirmation rather than education. Cycles shorten, conversion improves without the reps changing anything about how they sell. Only the explanation changed. So please go look at your website headline right now, or your LinkedIn profile headline, or the opening line of your sales deck, and ask yourself, is this describing something the buyer feels or something the product does? If it's the product, that's the gap. Positioning isn't about describing your product better, it's about describing the buyer's role accurately enough that they feel understood before they've said a word. When a buyer reads your headline and thinks, this is exactly what I've been dealing with, you've already done the hardest part of the sale. Everything that follows is confirming what they already believe. Your product might be genuinely excellent. Most products that struggle with pipeline are. The product isn't the problem, the explanation is. So in the next video, I'm going to get into how to actually build that problem frame. Specifically, how to extract the language your ICP uses to describe the problem, and how to use it to rewrite messaging that sounds like you understand them before you've met. If this changed how you think about positioning, please subscribe. I'll keep unpacking how B2B SaaS founders build GTM that actually compounds. I'm Frank Husman, and I'll see you in the next one.